The scariest thing about buying a business is buying a lemon. This is why you need the right lawyer. Hi, I'm Jaryd Krause. I'm the host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast, and today I'm speaking with Katarina Strandberg, who is a Swedish business lawyer specializing in venture capital, scale-ups, and M&A. She advises small, medium enterprise leaders and investors, drawing on her experience in deal structuring, fund law, and legislative work. And she's also a published author and an angel investor, and she's taught at Swedish universities and served on international advisory boards. And in this pod, Kat and I talk about the risks of buying a business and how to remove those risks and what lawyers do for you to remove those risks. What are some of the things they do throughout legal DD? We also talk about what happens when deal fatigue sets in and whose job it is and how either the advisor or the lawyer manages those emotions and prevents deal fatigue having a deal collapse. Katarina shares some examples of some deals that have gone wrong, some deals that have gone right. We talk about deal structures. We talk about how to fund these businesses. We talk about how to lock in a price with a lawyer and lock in your fee prices when you're acquiring a business, and so many things about buying a business with minimal risk, not buying a job, and making sure that you're not put up for a very, very expensive mistake. Now, this is such a valuable podcast. Of course, we talk about due diligence. If you haven't got my due diligence framework, make sure you get it. There'll be a link to that in the description. It's helped people make millions of dollars and save people millions of dollars. It's free. Check it out. Let's dive into the pod. Kat, welcome to the pod. Thank you for your time.
Hello. Thank you.
We had a brief chat last week to get this pod set up, and I heard all about your adventures and what you used to do and how you got into this and now angel investing. Congrats on your journey and what you've achieved.
Well, thank you. And I do have the best job in the world, so I must say.
That's good. That's amazing. There's not many people that absolutely love what they do, and it's a rarity, so I'm very happy for you. Now, let's just dive straight in. What's the latest sort of online business that you helped somebody acquire? Like, what size are we looking at? What was the business model? Where did it come from? Yeah, give us the goss.
Well, as a lawyer, I can't say any details, but I can give you details as regards mistakes I've seen, how you can work with them, things, because I, of course, watch your show, and I love that it's so niched and so helpful, because you're always very concrete. So I've been thinking, like, how can I, as a business lawyer, what have I seen, what mistakes? So happy to share that. But as regards the latest deal, I think it was 7 million euros.
Okay.
Across, yeah. So I'm not sure exactly the ratio to dollar today.
It's probably like 12 million-ish USD, I guess. Yeah. What was the business model?
Well, it was online, but it had some physical presence also, which is something I found very interesting. And I thought perhaps we could touch on that and also hear your view on that. What's the difference between having an online only business and having an online that also has a physical presence, and where do we really draw the line? It might not be, in particular when you're buying, you might think that, wow, it's online, it's so digital, so scalable. But then when you look it through, you realize, well, you need to have your feet on the ground in various ways. And you cannot always be global just because you're digital, because it can be legal issues that come up, etc., or practical issues, or tariffs, or what have you, right?
Issues. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting perspective. Where do you draw the line from being exclusively online?
Yeah, I mean, it's very open to interpretation, of course, because online doesn't exclusively mean that you can sell everywhere in the world because of different jurisdictions. And like you said, there's legal issues and all of these things. So where I started is I started helping people make an income online so that they could work from their laptop or work from home and sort of travel and have the freedom to spend more time with their family and do what they love with the people they love. That's what I mean by being online and running most of it online. Yeah, talk to us about issues and things to avoid and mistakes people have made through acquisitions where you've helped them get out of sort of some sticky situations or, yeah.
Yeah, because I heard on another of your episodes, you mentioned also that the smaller business you buy, typically the bigger risk. Because they haven't had this huge accounting firm, or they don't have a CFO having checks and balances in place, etc. And typically, the smaller the business, less likely are to use an expert like you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very general statement because when you compare one business to another business, there's different risk involved with single source dependency on one supplier, revenue source, traffic source, key person dependency versus another business that might be a bit smaller, that has some diversification in those areas. But typically in terms of size, how much the business is earning and what its value is, what it's worth in the marketplace today, typically a smaller business under the 500K range is a lot more susceptible to outside risks and environment and their competitors because they are small and they have less resources to reinvest into problems that need to be solved along the way when we're in business versus say you've got this business you just mentioned before, maybe it's a $12 million business, probably making anywhere from 2-3 mil to 7 million a year in profit, and depending on the business model, and they can throw money at issues and resolve certain things that pop up. For example, if the Facebook ads stop being as profitable, they can change the ads, manipulate that, put more ad budget in to test that to get the ads profitable again.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, of course, one risk if you're buying a business that's perhaps, I mean, it's natural if you're an entrepreneur that you focus on running the business, not everything around. But of course, one thing is if you do buy the shares, not asset purchase, is of course that you buy all of the liabilities. So I'm sure we've both seen that happen. You assume the baggage as well, right?
It's like dating, right? As well. Like, I mean, we're all humans. We've all got to stuff, and so do businesses. And when we're investing in a business, we need to understand it's a risk. Anything we do in life is a risk. And so what level of risk is worth taking for the potential reward?
Yeah. Completely agree. Yeah. So one huge mistake that I've seen is when you do not have advisors doing a proper due diligence. You think you're really buying this lovely revenue stream and you have this exclusivity, right? Online. You buy the business and the next day the buyer gets a letter, a notice from the supplier where you had this exclusivity that was the complete business model. The profitability was in being exclusive in that goods, and then say, sorry, you know what? We have a change of control here in the contract. That means that we do not need to stick with you anymore. We're just going to tear that contract up. And the buyer didn't even know what the change of control was.
Yeah. You mean as in an exclusive agreement to purchase wholesale products at a certain price?
To sell in that jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So it was the exclusivity to sell the product in that jurisdiction. The product was in high demand, really good brand, not something huge. It wasn't Nike or anything. It was still a small business, but it was going brilliant. And they did not know what the change of control was, so they didn't check for it. They didn't ask for it. And the sellers had no obligation to tell them. They didn't have any warranties or anything, no. So it was, sure, you didn't ask, it's your problem. So they literally threw money down the drain because the change of control says that if the business changes owner, then the buyer or supplier, the other party to the contract, can just walk away.
Yeah.
So the supplier said, we're walking away. If you want to keep, I mean, we know it's going good, but if you want to keep being the one selling, we're going to double the price. So the margins were gone. It was off.
And this is when you're doing due diligence, you do legal DD into the business, which is a spectrum of different things. And one of them is checking contracts and reading through contracts and making sure they're either above board or understanding what risks are within those certain contracts, which if they had have engaged you, they would have seen, you would have seen and mentioned that to them, which can either cause the deal to fail and then pull out completely, which is probably the best move. Or if it's not as much of a risk, it can help decrease the price and aid in negotiation strategies.
Or a third way is that we try to solve it before closing. So when we signing of the share purchase agreement, in the agreement we say a condition to closing, we will only go to close, that is handing over the keys and the money, if you, the seller, procure a waiver from the change of control from the supplier. So we say we're not going to go through, we agree on everything, but a condition to closing is that you make sure that we keep the contract. So we remove the risk.
Yes. That's what a great lawyer does, right? is where you can help remove the risk. So obviously there's contracts that you go and check. What are some of the other legal DD parts that you run through typically?
Good question. And you already mentioned like key man risk, and the smaller businesses, even online, can be very dependent sometimes on
the seller as a person, right?
Yes.
And also that can, in the valuation, you might, if you, let's say you do a multiple on EBIT, and then the seller hasn't taken any salary, and he does the marketing, the sales, the CEO, the COO, everything, right? Yep. And you plan to work from home and have somebody else running the show. But that means that the EBIT hasn't considered the salary for 3 or 5 people, worst case scenario. So then you need to, before you set the price for the shares, the price for the business, you need to do an add back. So you need to add that back so that the EBIT ain't that positive anymore. So you pay less. So anything, that's also a mistake, that you need to do a normalization of the value, the EBIT. So you make sure that if the seller works in a certain way, perhaps haven't taken a salary, so that is not reflected in the earning capabilities, you need to make sure to adjust that. Otherwise, you will be hit with thinking you bought at this value and the earning capabilities are fantastic. And then you need, oh my gosh, I didn't think about the working capital. I need to put in more money for inventory. I didn't think about needing to hire people. I need to put in more money. So that's also something that's financial/legal that you review, really.
Yeah, when you do a quality of earnings, you get a quality of earnings report from a due diligence specialist. They should showcase all of these things and help you foresee what add backs are fair and not fair, and whether the business is being valued on SDE, seller discretionary earnings, or EBITDA, and what that looks like. Are you buying? This is a part of my job as a buy-side advisor. Like, nobody that I work with wants to buy a job.
No,
want to get out of a job.
I love that. That's so good. That is so good. That's exactly what it is, right?
That's what they're doing, is you're buying a glorified job. And that's what most people do when they are maybe sold into purchasing a franchise. That might be like a McDonald's or a chicken shop or whatever it is. The business can be making $200,000 a year.
Yep.
And it can be more than their wage of $100,000 a year, but they're going from $100,000 a year, maybe 40 hours per week, to 50 to 60 hours per week and $200,000 per year. And their goal was actually maybe just replacing their income at $100K, when you could buy a business for that and work 5 hours a week on that business.
Exactly. Completely agree. And one thing you can do, again, like technical, how can we help you out so you don't overpay, is, of course, if you're uncertain about the earning capabilities, about the value. Let's say that the sellers say that they want to sell at $1 million, and you feel like, well, I mean, if it is that profitable, if the earning capabilities are for real, I'm good, but I don't want to buy a job, and I don't want to buy a rat hole or something like that. You can always work with an earnout. So you can say, okay, I hear you, but you get $500K now, and then in the next 3 years, we'll portion out the rest of the share purchase price. But that will depend on your prognosis, the things you are promising me. You as the seller, you're selling this business with a specific earning capability. If that checks out, I will pay you the rest. I will be happy to pay you the rest. But that you are telling me, so then put your money where your mouth is, right? So that's something, an earnout is something you can work with.
Absolutely. And I think what's misconstrued through a lot of media online is that you can buy businesses with a lot less of your own cash, and you can do these sorts of earnout things. Now, I just want people to be aware of that. Like, if you're going to find a seller that's going to do an earnout of 50%, be prepared to pay a lot more for the business rather than paying like a low multiple. Be prepared to pay maybe a slightly higher multiple, because they're showing that the business is worth them holding 50% and it meeting those certain metrics within that 3 to 5 year example that you mentioned for the earnout, versus having an earnout where the business doesn't have to meet certain metrics and it's just terrible for the seller. Like, that's a very important one for people to understand, is because a lot of people are telling people that they can buy a business with no money down. Yeah, you can. There's ways it can be done, but what sort of businesses are those?
I typically work with, when I work on the bigger, more conventional M&A deals, then we often work with an earnout. So the bigger, the more professional, the more typical it is, because they have checks and balances. And the point with the earnout should always be, like you said, that it pays itself. You get more profit than you give it to the seller, of course. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth it, right?
Which is a great thing to mention, is like, on the larger deals, why are they doing earnouts on larger deals versus smaller deals, and why is it more normal? because like we said before, larger businesses are more stable and the sellers can understand that the business is solid. It's a larger deal and the earnout is going to work for them.
I think it is because the negotiations are so tough. I mean, they are heavily negotiated and it is kind of, I mean, if you do it right, I know that it can be subject to disputes, of course, but if you do it right, it's actually a brilliant mechanism to create more comfort for the buyer. And the seller still getting what they want. So it's kind of, you shift the risk from the buyer to the seller, but then you need to, like you said, pay a bit of a higher price. I mean, another solution, if you think that an earnout is too complex or the seller doesn't want to, you can at least work with an escrow account. So you don't send all of the money across to the buyer on day one, because then you have to chase him down. He will be in the Bahamas sunbathing. He's done. He's out, right? So instead, you put it in a trusted third party, like a bank.
Yeah.
So that the seller gets 50% of the money now and 50% within 12 months, but only if all of those warranties that you asked him for, because you're going to ask him for warranties if you want to protect yourself. That is that everything he says is true. So if something doesn't take it out, he promises, I paid all of my taxes. I have no litigations. And then you get the keys and you get a notice from the tax office that, then you can turn to that third party and get money back, get the damages or price reduction. So it's much easier than trying to litigate and trying to find the sellers. That can also be a way to protect yourself.
The sellers can see that the money is there. It's not something that the new owner needs to come up with.
Exactly.
You've got, that assurance there. What are some structures that you have seen or people have tried to, or sellers have tried to make work with just diabolical for one of your clients as a buyer?
Love that question. Well, one thing is, of course, if the seller is still hungry, if he was a key man, he had key relationships, perhaps with the supplier or with key customers or even the employees, is that you do not use a non-compete. So what actually happens is he sells for a fair amount and then he starts a competing business. And he's already up and running. But you don't have any protection. You didn't even think about that. So he can call up his former employees, that top seller or that top logistic guy and say, you know what?
Wholesaler, everything. Yeah,
exactly. So suddenly you're competing with the seller. You paid him and then he is using all of his relationships that he might have had for 15 years and outrunning you. And I mean, that's a nightmare. So that's really, you should make sure, even if you think the seller is over now, make sure that he will not start a competing business.
I believe that every buyer should be having a non-compete agreement at least 2 years for every acquisition. And if a seller can't sign one of those, then you don't want the business.
Love it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why they need you.
Well, both of us, right? Like I work as a buy-side advisor, but I also work with a legal counsel that goes and does that checking of the contracts, the legal DD part, because that's very, very imperative. It's my job to get all that information, understand it, advise on the information. With legal counsel and my counsel, people are far more protected, especially when they're buying a 7 to 8 figure asset.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about. When it comes to funding in Europe, I'm fascinated. SBA loans up to 5 million are very, very common in America. And you can also get them up to $8 million as well. How are people funding these acquisitions in Europe? Is there a main sort of way or bank that provides acquisition finance, or how is it cash, or how's it being funded typically over there?
Yeah, I actually work a lot with venture capital and business angels.
Mm-hmm.
So the network, the ecosystem here in Europe is kind of close. You have only a phone call away. So if you're looking to buy something, you typically call and say, do you want 10% of this? I will need X amount to acquire it. Or it's a buy and build situation, etc. So I usually work with private funding, where you find some kind of investor supporting the structure, supporting the deal. And then you also get more contacts. You typically get some kind of competence also. So I'm mostly not looking at acquiring as a sole acquirer.
Mm-hmm.
Rather you're getting a team with you. So the cap table becomes a bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's on the team? So it's a team of investors, but who else is on the team for operations if it is an owner-operated business or something like that?
Yeah. Well, hopefully, like you said, nobody wants to buy a job. So
In ideal situations, you have the sufficient team in place, either in-house or it's only consultants. That depends on how the structure is, right? So typically, you don't really have a team, but when you look at the angels, you would want, if you're going into e-commerce, you look at what business angels have succeeded and doing well in e-commerce. And that doesn't mean you have to run for a huge exit. It can mean that you're only looking for a really nice revenue stream the next 10, 15, 20 years. And you can split that. So sometimes I feel that when we talk about investors, we're always talking about the startups and the great exits. And you know what? Many investors just like revenue, just like you and I. Just something tripping in every year. Like a more safe, solid business.
Yeah, I think it's mostly glorified in America that acquisitions means just buy something, scale it up and sell it, because it's pretty common. But the way I think about it is play long-term games with long-term people, and the compounding effect of buying something once and holding on to it and growing it over time adds far more income and rest and revenue and everything into the deal.
I completely agree. But you said in your case, so it's not privately funding, it's more that you use bank finance. That's the most typical.
In America, yeah. In America, it's typically, if you're buying a 7-figure asset, typically you need a couple $100,000, and then you go away and buy a 7-figure asset, depending on what funding is. I've had a lot of finance brokers, experts on talk about that. So everybody that is listening wants more about that, just go through and type in financing and SBA into my pod search, and you'll find that as you get to larger deals, like if you get into the 8-figure range, then typically, like you said, it's like the money is coming from other investors or larger banks and different sources to acquire.
Completely agree. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what else can we share that's like good to know? Of course, sorry?
What would you say for you as, an M&A lawyer, what's the hardest part of the deal? What is typically the hardest parts of the deal and the easiest parts of the deal?
Love that. I think that when they start talking, or even at the LOI stage, they're so sure that it's going to happen. They're so sure.
Is this the seller or the buyer, or both?
Both. They agree. Everything's fine. They agree. They shook hands.
Yeah.
They're super happy.
Yeah.
And then you start the DD process. And then the seller might actually be a bit annoyed because he gets questioned, right? It's a bit about somebody calling your baby ugly. You have to be careful how you communicate if you find something that's wrong, right? So it doesn't come like defensive. Because if the seller becomes defensive, 1, you won't find out as much. 2, you will have a much harder time negotiating those reps and warranties or pushing down the price, whatever it might be. So I would say when you do the due diligence and find issues, making sure you have a good communication with the seller. So it's still positive, even though it might mean that he won't get as much as he envisioned. Because in his head, he has those figures out already, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And this is very, very critical. And in one of my courses, I teach how to become an attractive buyer. And a part of that is because if you're a more attractive buyer compared to other competitors bidding for the business, you can likely acquire the business for less than, say, somebody who's not so attractive. They're just full steam ahead. Here's a price, I'll pay more, but I don't care what you have to say and do it my way or the highway, but I'll give you more money. It's very important, like you said, to not call somebody's baby ugly. And the way that you can do that is not say, what's wrong with this? It's how you frame your conversation and asking, hey, I want to understand what's happening here a little bit more. I don't quite understand it. Can you help me?
Yes.
And what they're doing is they're like, yeah, of course, like we're humans. What we are here to do is to serve. Of course, I want to help and serve and help you understand what's wrong. You're not saying this is wrong, fix it, or tell me how we can fix it, or I'm out. It's like, I just want to understand this.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. That's super, super, super important. I mean, you want to reach the end goal. You don't want to prove being right on an issue, right? So I completely agree with your approach. Really, take it slow, take it nicely, be curious, ask questions. So yeah. And when you help buyers, does the seller, does he have an expert or is he typically alone in the process?
if they don't have an expert, I tell them to get an expert, because it can, I have a lot of trust in the marketplace, and people do trust me even though if they're a seller without counsel. But it makes my job easier and everybody else's job easier if they understand the process, and it's not just me and the buy side educating them and them going, is he just trying to get the best terms and price and deal structure for his client? And the answer is yes, I am. But I'm not going to just be totally unfair and elude you or misconstrue you down a path that's not actually right for you. I think every person in the transaction should do what's right for them and what's fair for them. And the only way they can know that is by having counsel on their side. For example, if we get to a contract of sale, an asset purchase agreement, whatever you want to call it, and they don't have an econ lawyer, right? And they've got some other lawyer that's like litigation lawyer or something like that. Like that, they're going to fumble, and that is going to make it too hard for us to come to a middle ground to agree on price. So the answer is yes, absolutely. There are people that are happy to just do it without legal counsel, but I suggest look, you don't do it yourself. No. This is a 7-figure, 8-figure deal. Get some help.
I'm doing exactly the same. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Much better than being professionals, so they understand where you're coming from, why you're presenting this, and what consequences it has, etc. Completely agree.
Have you ever got to a point in a transaction or an acquisition where one side was a bit frustrated in the sense that it's either taking too long or just deal fatigue has started to set in and emotions have gone, well, stuff this buyer, stuff this seller. I'm not going to proceed in the business, but alone the deal is really good. What are some of the things that, because this is what my job is managing those emotions and helping people see it's worth hanging in there or it's worth leaving. I want to ask you, what are some of the things that you have helped clients work through to either decide to leave or to stay?
Oh gosh, deal fatigue that's such a huge problem, right?
Yeah, it's everything.
In particular, if the DD takes long and you ask more and more questions, need more information, or if you need some kind of authorization from the authorities, or
Absolutely. We're going through that now. It's we're just there's this one thing we need, and then it's okay, we need another thing now, and then we need, and it's both sides are we're working on getting it. It's just but the trust really needs to be there, and that's where that's my job, and your job is to showcase it that the trust is there. So what are some of the things you do to help?
And actually, one thing I think is important is if you can work with your expert, financial, legal, etc., and ask for a fixed price. Because one thing that's a concern when you think, because in the beginning you think, we're going to close in 4 weeks. We know it. We agree. No problem, Katarina. I'm so happy.
Yeah, already thinking about the money.
You know that, right?
And spending it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So a concern after 4 months can be wow, I don't know how much the cost will be. I'm starting to get nervous. I have all of these experts. We're not moving forward. And now he reneged on that. I feel very uncomfortable. I'm getting annoyed. Mm-hmm. So I think one thing is knowing your budget for the process, feeling assured, what is it going to cost me?
Yeah.
Because then it's easier. And then another thing is to early on, for you and me, to tell them that I know it feels really clear cut and we have this really aggressive timeline. But what I typically see is that things take longer than you think. And so early on, and that's not normal. And when things take longer, you're going to feel very frustrated. You're going to be concerned that you're not focusing on your day job or your business, because this just takes hours and hours and it's going to cost you so much with the lawyers and the financial experts. So explain early on. How can we control it and that it most likely will happen so they know?
I love that. When you think about legal fees, not having a fixed price for either side is crazy, I think.
When there's so small deal sizes, it's different if you are this huge institutional buyer, but
even if you're buying somebody that's buying a $1 million business, and say we're looking at, 10 grand for legals, or say 20 grand for legals. If you're starting off at 5 grand, you think, I could get this cheaper, and it ends up blowing out to $15,000 because the deal's gone from a 3-month process to an 8-month process.
Exactly.
It's just it's not fun. And that's that financial pressure. Like when you could just say, rather lock in like something that might be slightly higher and not need it, but not have to like, and that's what our goal is, I think, in investing and life is to, well, my main goal is to have less stress and have a more fun life. And if I'm going through this period that's going to just be such a terrible experience, then that terrible experience of the acquisition and the stress and the frustration is going to pour over into the business I purchase.
Yeah.
And it's just tarnished the whole thing. Yeah. So why not set ourselves up to win versus possibly fail?
Have a good conversation with your experts. Ask questions early on, and us as experts, make sure we explain why. Why are you recommending fixed fees, etc.? So I completely agree.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because some lawyers, it's more beneficial for lawyers to just say, like, I can just do it for this price per hour, and here's roughly how many hours it would take
much better.
But it's much better.
If I only wanted to be billing, yes. Hourly is better for the lawyer.
Yeah. I've actually been through a deal where we had a fixed price with a lawyer and things went a little bit longer, and the lawyer had dropped the ball on so many things, like not even reading things very well. And then we needed to go through another stage through the business for the acquisition, and they asked for more money. And it was a fixed price already. And they're like, well, I can't continue unless we go this route. And we had to remove that lawyer from the deal and hire another lawyer in, because it was unfortunate that that lawyer was the way that it happened out that way. And there might be some things that I don't know that's going on behind the scenes between my client and the lawyer. Wasn't exactly sure, but the actions sort of showcase that like something happened. Thank you so much for coming on, Kat. Where can we send people to check out more about what you're up to?
Well, I also have a YouTube channel, Business Law Toolbox. So please drop the link below. Yeah. Zero cost, general knowledge about business law tools, from negotiations to contracts to privacy laws, etc., even financial crimes, which is a bit fun. So, and then I have my own law firm, STD Corporate and Commercial Law. So I can easily be reached at kat@stdcorporateandcommerciallaw.com.
Perfect. Guys, there'll be links to all of that in the show notes. Check it out. Kat, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you. Your channel is amazing. So happy to join. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Kat, bye.